I call Councillor Sepuloni.
Mr Speaker, that speech was a little bit disappointing. I just wanted to point out the fact that, firstly, I don't understand what he's talking about with regards to saying that my colleague Phil Twyford has flip-flopped. He hasn't flip-flopped on anything. We've been quite assertive with respect to our housing plan. The same can't be said for that side of the House. And he talked about some random fundraiser that Phil Twyford should have. Well, actually, the fundraiser that member's been involved with is actually selling our state houses. What kind of fundraiser is that, Alfred Ngaro? He should be ashamed of himself. I'm sure there's a whole lot of people in the seat he's trying to win off the current electorate MP, Phil Twyford. I'm sure there's a whole lot of people in Te Atatū that do not support the decisions that he's made alongside his government with respect to selling state housing that has been built up over generations by generations of New Zealanders. He sold out. Okay, Mr Speaker, back to the bill. Can I just say, Mr Speaker, can I just say one of the really disappointing parts of this, given the fact that we have been given the responsibility by the public, we are elected representatives and we are here to scrutinise legislation to make sure that we're giving New Zealanders the best deal possible. And it's really concerning that actually we only have half a regulatory impact statement here. So there are two parts to the bill. We've made it really clear that we don't have any major issue with part one, apart from the fact that actually it hasn't been that effective to date, but that doesn't mean that we'd necessarily throw it out. But we do have major reservations about part two, and the only regulatory impact statement we have is for part one of the bill that actually we on this side of the House would have no problem voting for if it was split off by part two, which actually does need further scrutiny, Mr Speaker. So I want to talk a little bit about part two and speak to some of the reservations that we have. So basically with part two, we're looking at the Public Works Act and the offer back changes. So clause 10 of the Housing Legislation Amendment Bill amends section 15 of the Housing Act to state that the Public Works Act, sections 40 to 42, do not apply to the sale of state housing land. A specific clause states that this change does not affect the right of first refusal under any Treaty of Waitangi, Claim, Settlement or Collective Redress Act or deed. Minister Smith has advised us that the purpose of this is to prevent a situation where the Crown develops housing on land and upon completion a person decides to use their offer-back rights to purchase the completed development. The Minister has given us his assurance, I'm not sure how much that counts for, but he's given us his assurance that this provision could only be used for developments and would not be used for the sale of existing state housing stock held by Housing New Zealand. And the Minister has argued that this change enhances the rights of Māori as the right of first refusal is protected and the removal of the offer-back provision means that there is greater ability to negotiate agreements with Māori for housing developments. That's well, my colleague Meka Whaitiri has asked how many Māori, how many iwi have entered into agreements. But I also want to say, on this side of the House, well, on that side of the House, the Minister is arguing that this enhances the rights of Māori. Well, the Māori on this side of the House and the Labour Party in general don't think that's the case, so we won't be supporting it. But also, let's look across the floor. We did notice at the end of first reading who didn't support this bill. Not only didn't the Māori Party and the Labour Party, New Zealand First and the Green Party vote against this at first reading, but the Māori Party did too. And that is the political party in partnership with the government that's supposed to be advocating for Māori. So here they are saying that actually when they vote against it, what that reads to us is that they don't believe that that enhances the rights of Māori either. We on this side of the House already knew that was the case, but that reinforces that that is the fact, Mr Speaker. Labour has concerns that this provision actually won't give Māori the protection that the Minister says it does, and that the provision could be used to make it easier for the government to go through its state house sell-off. The government's claim that this is merely a clarification is tenuous given the Ngāti Whātua incident. As part of government's Auckland surplus Crown land program, the government sought to use the Housing Act to circumvent Ngāti Whātua's right of first refusal under the Tāmaki Collective Deed of Settlement. Ngāti Whātua challenged this in court and the government ended up settling the case in order to stop the legal action. That the government was willing to settle in that case shows the law is far from certain, and this situation could apply to an offer-back provision just as it could for Ngāti Whātua's right of first refusal. We can't support a provision like this going through under urgency, Mr Speaker. We need it to be properly scrutinised, and it's disgusting that the government have tried to circumvent the proper process here by not allowing it to go to Select Committee and by trying to wrap it up. And they do have a habit of doing this, putting something that we won't support or that we don't want to support and that they know we will not want to support, alongside something that actually we wouldn't mind supporting in an attempt to try and get us to sell out and basically agree to the whole thing. Well, in this situation, we're not going to do that, actually, National Government. We've been really sensible with our advice and with our proposal on this side of the House by saying to the government, just split the bill in two. Split the bill in two, and then, even though we have some reservations about Part 1, we can support Part 1, but we can't support Part 1 with Part 2 alongside it, and with that being part of the deal. It's a dodgy deal, Mr Speaker, and we won't be supporting it. It was disappointing to hear Nick Smith at the beginning of this second debate about the Housing Legislation Amendment Bill, because he actually seemed to take his whole 10 minutes, or at least 9 minutes and 55 seconds of his 10 minutes, just trying to justify his track record. And Mr Speaker, what that says to us on this side of the House is he's feeling really sensitive right now. I'm sure that even some of his colleagues are a little bit critical of the fact that he's done very little to address the housing issues that we face in this country. And Mr Speaker, I'm sure that his colleagues are coming under pressure by some of their constituents as well. You know, Mr Speaker, looking at some of the developments that have or haven't happened by the under this national government, they should be a little bit concerned about what's happening in their electorate. And actually, it's quite timely that the New Plymouth MP is here, because one of those developments is actually in his electorate. 8 years ago, the New Plymouth community were told that they were going to get a redevelopment, that Marfell was going to be redeveloped. Over that time, they've had houses pulled out. They've got houses that have been boarded up. And now, 8 years later, nothing is happening there. 8 years later, there's no additional housing. There's less housing than what there was 8 years ago. And then when we put in an OIA to try and find out where the government is at with respect to this housing development, what we get back is a report that says, well, actually, we've decided there's no real need for any more state housing in this area, and also we couldn't find a partner to partner with, so we've decided that this probably won't go ahead. Well, actually, in the context of the housing crisis that we face in New Zealand, with over 41,000 people homeless, and in the context actually locally there of the emergency shelter telling me that they've had a 33% increase in the last year in people needing emergency shelter because they're homeless, then I find it really difficult to comprehend that that member for New Plymouth and that national government can say that there is no need for any further housing New Zealand development in that area, and to leave it empty like a ghost town. If you go there, it's so eerie, and knowing that there's so many families that do need homes in that area, but they've been neglected by their local member, Jonathan Young. They've been neglected by the national government, who continue to make excuses for not building when all they need to do is build. So, Mr Speaker, my advice to Nick Smith is just actually to get rid of the pipeline, get rid of the consents, and get rid of the anger that he's clearly carrying and the sensitivities that he's carrying about the role, or the poor job that he's done of his role, and actually just get on with building some houses. And so that's what we've proposed on this side of the House. The national government would do themselves a service if they just picked up Labor's Kiwi Build policy.
I call Jonah Naylor.